Unit 5, Listening. Part 2, Exam Task. You will hear a student called Max talking about his visit to the Eraseum in Gothenburg, Sweden. For questions 1 to 10, complete the sentences with a word or short phrase.
Well, I'm going to talk about my visit to the Eraseum in Gothenburg in Sweden. I went there with my technology class. It was really interesting and we all enjoyed it. We arrived about 9:30 in the morning and we were met by our guide, who fortunately spoke very good English. The museum is located in some underground shelters not far from a former airport which was used by the military. Building the shelters was a huge project. Work started in the 1940s and then continued in the 1950s. The guide told us that they had to carve out and move tons of rock, which is much harder than digging out earth. And we found out later that no one knew anything about the existence of the shelters till just over 20 years ago, when work on creating the museum began. That was because they didn't appear on maps and were kept secret, even from people who lived locally. And when you enter the museum, you realise how much thought went into the design. First, you have to press a button outside the main doors. As each person does this, the number on the counter screen changes, so you can see exactly how many people are inside at any one time. That's a safety thing. Then there is a loud beep and the doors slide open. They weigh about 180 tons and are about a metre thick, so the building would have been well defended against attack. I was expecting to see some really old planes, so I was amazed that the first thing you see when you go in are some jets, which look as if they could have been built quite recently. I got a very clear impression of what the shelter was like when it was in active use in the 1950s. And the great thing about this museum is that nothing is off limits. You can climb into any of the exhibits. I really enjoyed getting into one of the cockpits. I was expecting the controls to be complex, but the size of it astonished me. It was so small. It must have been really hard for the pilot to cope with. After that, our guide told us about the photo gallery, which has pictures of the site construction and photos of the people who lived and worked in the building over the decades. I didn't find that so interesting, but later on we met a man who volunteers in the gallery now and was happy to describe his experiences of flying planes from the airport and servicing them underground. That was fascinating. Another thing I really liked was watching people hard at work restoring some of the old planes. The amazing thing was that some of them were working on a wing, and the frame was built of wood, just like the models I've been making. Once that had been made, the wing was covered with fabric, using lots of layers to give it strength. I have to say, it didn't look very strong to me, and it was very delicate work. We stopped for refreshments and then spent more time looking at other aircraft displays before making our way through some of the service tunnels, which were used to bring in supplies, and then going to the control room where we learned all about holding patterns,